This is the Healing Our Sight podcast, where we discuss vision issues and healing strategies from the patient perspective. The goal of this podcast is to create an awareness of the diverse types of vision issues people experience, to highlight the types of help available, and to open a dialogue between patients to show we're not alone in our vision struggles. As a patient who gained 3D vision at age 54 through vision therapy combined with strabismus surgery, I feel uniquely qualified to offer a hopeful, balanced perspective on the possibilities. Please use the link in the show notes to send me a message, and thanks for joining me today. Today on the show, I'm joined by Claudia Muehlenweg, also known as the Holistic Vision Coach. She's the founder of the Naturally Clear Vision Institute and a leading voice in the natural vision improvement movement. Through her certification programs, courses, and international workshops, Claudia helps people around the world improve their eyesight by addressing the root causes of blurry vision without relying on glasses, contacts, or surgery. She's also a best-selling co-author of A New World of Seeing, and her own vision journey began at just 3 years old. After initially struggling with strabismus and glasses for years, she now helps others see clearly, naturally, just as she has for over 20 years. Welcome, Claudia.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Oh, I am too. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about your personal journey and how you came to this practice or this calling, really, of vision improvement?
I think similar to you, I had a squint. So my right eye was turning in, and it wasn't to the point where I didn't have any depth perception, but I definitely was like the clumsy kid that ran into things. And I was farsighted, and I got my first pair of glasses at the age of 3. Now I'm born in the 60s, in the early 60s. And when I got to school at age 6, I was the only girl. I think there was one other boy, but I see my first day of school picture. Nobody wore glasses. I was bullied. I was teased. There was no Harry Potter, no nerds, no, it wasn't cool. And I remember just feeling super insecure and not confident. And again, I wasn't athletic. I would trip over things. I was always that kid that, had the bruises and all this stuff. And I remember when I was about 12, I lived in a small suburb of in Hamburg, Germany, my hometown, and they needed kids for the handball team. They didn't have enough girls because I'm like, why did they ask me? I'm literally the worst. Like throwing and catching a ball, it would probably hit my head. I was the worst. Like depth perception wasn't great. So I think they just needed enough girls. And my mom said, why don't you just do that? So in hindsight, 3 years into doing that, playing handball, being outside, sunlight, moving, peripheral vision, catching, throwing, all the stuff. Doing the actual games, I didn't get the ball that much, but in practice we did. My eye doctor said, your eyes are normal. I was like, what? I went from like being this be called all the names to like, you have pretty eyes. And then a few years into that, like the freedom of good vision, I did my high school exams and I was not a good student. I studied and studied and I noticed my vision would get blurry really quick. And at that point, I was like, okay, never again do I want to be in glasses. So I scoured all the bookshops back then, the library. I went everywhere. I found one book on natural vision improvement. And I started doing the things, and it was all the relax exercises that you probably interviewed other people, like yawning and blinking and all those things. And I noticed how they helped me immediately. And I stayed out of glasses my 20s, my mid-30s. I was like, and then mid-30s, difficult marriage, ended in divorce, single mom, lots of crazy hours, no sleep, and I was back in glasses. And at that point, I was like, okay, at that point, I was 40, I kind of that decline. It's like, okay, everybody, I'm over 40, everybody gets glasses, at this point, it's too late. And I remember one night where I tried to go out and have fun, and I got lost in the downtown Los Angeles. And back then, we didn't have Google, we had the maps. And I remember that little light in the car, you turn it on, like it's kind of really dim. And I had my glasses on and off, and I could not read the map. I was like, really, I knew I was not in a good part of town. And eventually I just I just drove, and eventually I found a street and made it home. And I remember taking off my glasses, and my vision was so much blurrier. than it was before I'd put them on. And that happened every time, but this time it was so extreme. And I thought to myself, I need to do something about this. And I remember that morning at 1 a.m., I was digging through all my stuff. I found that book and I went practice those things again. But at that point, I needed more help, right? The book alone wasn't really cutting it. And I started working with a private vision coach and I saw improvements. And then I kind of decided this is really what I want to do. I saw the improvements, and being kind of disenfranchised with my work in advertising, I was like, I'm a visual person. And so I did the teacher training, like, I don't even know what was it, 2009.
Okay.
And that's that. So basically, twice in my life did I go through these challenges, but really being bullied and teased. Like the driver of this was being like feeling like myself for the first time when I didn't wear glasses, when I didn't have that thing on my face,
Mhm.
really was the thing. And other people like, why do glasses bother you so much? I'm like, I don't know. I just felt like the world was distorted. There was this barrier between me and the world, you know? So yeah,
I think
that's it.
sometimes people put up that barrier on purpose. I've talked to my kids about that, and they say, "Oh, I like it. It, like, protects me." And I'm thinking, "No."
I think you're absolutely right. I remember being shy because I wore glasses and I didn't have the confidence, right? And I didn't see myself as an attractive teenager. And I was very protected. I grew up kind of naivete about things, not really understanding things. But I remember what I did, Chrissy Hind, the Pretenders, like I had those bangs that were really long. And so basically I had these bangs and way like thicker hair back then. And it was basically, that was my way of kind of hiding a little bit.
Mhm.
But I think you're absolutely right. Some people like that. My mom said when she had cataract surgery, oh my God, now I don't like it because I have the dark circles. She's in her late 80s, the wrinkles. And I think that's a whole different story when you kind of use the frames to kind of hide, for vanity purposes
Mhm.
versus emotional, like not feeling confident. Yeah, good points.
So tell us a little bit about how you got to your own method, because you did training. I'm assuming the book was a Bates book, is that right? And then you
Yeah,
did
it was.
training with a teacher that was a Bates teacher, maybe?
I think the thing is I always believe, yes, thank you for clarifying this. So the Bates method is really the foundation of all natural vision improvement because we have eye yoga, right? But a lot of things from the Bates method are overlapping with that. For instance, the cupping or palming. Other things are not so much in eye yoga that teach you staring at a candle versus we always teach blinking. But yes, I'm trained in the Bates method, in kind of more original Bates method. But when you think about yoga, for instance, I think it's a good example because we have yoga, which is a 5,000 years old ancient tradition. But then there's all these different versions of yoga. And to me, over the years, as I became a yoga teacher, I became a myofascial release therapist. So I started working with the body. Being a designer in my former career really also taught me more about colors. And so I kind of, in contrast and how we experience the world. So I kind of always see it as like every teacher kind of puts, their prior experience, their own vision, their other things that learned over the years into this kind of method. So I could say I'm a Bates method teacher because that's the foundation of my work.
Mhm.
But then I had other mentors, other teachers. So over the years, we kind of create our own thing that works for us. And I coined the natural clear vision method because that's what I found to be most effective. Are the things that I'm putting in there. And that is like Bates didn't really talk much about emotional things. He talked about mental states a lot, but not so much about emotional things, a little bit, but not that much. And so, adding all these things in that we now know also from science, I think that's really important to me. So I didn't want to be limiting myself Bates method because there's the purist, which is really amazing. But I wanted to have the freedom to kind of add in things as I learn and go along the way and what works with clients and not be, so forced. And one more thing I want to add, unless the yoga, we don't really have an association, a global association. We have local country association. I'm a member of 3 different associations.
Mhm.
But like in Germany, they do it very differently. They see it more as a training. So at the end of the day, I always say this. to especially my new future certification people that we're starting my certification. At the end of the day, whatever you do, you want to get your clients results.
Right.
You know, nobody cares if you do this breath work or that breath work. If it works and somebody sees better, that's what we want, right? It's
Yeah.
like, so, you know, that's how I see it basically.
Right. I think that your method is fascinating, and I've been looking for people who talk more about the emotional side of it because we don't treat the body as a whole, that like we're a whole person ever. You know, we just go to the eye doctor, get glasses, be done, and that's not what's behind the vision issue, right? So I've always been really interested in why do I have, you know, myopia and the strabismus that I was dealing with.
Yeah. And I initially didn't really learn much about the emotional aspects and I didn't really immerse myself so much in it. But then working with more and more clients and recognizing it and also working with other mentors and getting a better understanding of my own experience of the world. And as a farsighted person, I connected to that. You know, Martin Brofman was a big teacher in terms of this emotional aspect. And I was always outside of the bubble. I was always helping everybody else and not looking at myself. And when I read that, and when I kind of learned about this, I'm like, this makes so much sense. And then I'm finding that with more and more other people felt the same way. And when my own younger daughter experienced nearsightedness, I saw that kind of anxiety state, how that is connected to. So I was putting this together over time, but I have to say, I didn't start that way. It was definitely not something I initially practiced. I was way more on that physical level when I first started teaching the Bates method. And my first brand was the Bates Vision was my first website because I think the Bates method is amazing. And I think it's really the foundation of everything we do as natural vision improvement teachers. But
Mhm.
over time, I just found that sometimes it was not clear enough for me, or it didn't explain things enough for me, or it didn't work for some people. And I had to figure out other ways of kind of working on my own vision and work and helping my clients see
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, and that's how you came to your program that you teach now, right? Um,
Exactly. You know, you learn things from vision therapy and, which is a big field from behavioral optometry and neurooptometry. So you learn some of those techniques. And yeah, I think everybody that's a good teacher is not like has this kind of like, you know what I mean? They let other things come into their life and kind of how does this land for me and try it out with clients. And sometimes you're like, wow, I didn't expect this to happen. So I'm always humbled by the experiences that my clients have, and I'm also humbled by what I'm learning from around the world. So I think it's very important that we are open to other things.
yeah, I love that. So tell us a little bit about how your five-step process works with your method of vision improvement.
Yeah, so there's different 5 steps. So the 5 steps are basically the first thing is understanding your prescription. It's very important for everybody to like, what is my vision like? Because most people have no understanding. Like, they say I'm blind without my glasses. So if they have an eyeglass prescription, what does it mean? What is it? What is the astigmatism? Are you farsighted, nearsighted? How's your peripheral? Like really getting an idea what all this stuff means, right? That's kind of really the first understanding. And then for most people, the next step is really rest. Everybody, I feel, experiences this eye strain. And when it comes to rest and relaxation, I work both top down, which is more what we would think of palming. It's meditation. Like you start with the brain and you have those thoughts, and that helps you relax the body. And then I also do bottom up, which is for me the myofascial release. So a lot of times people have incredible tension, their breathing isn't optimal. So we like for many clients, working with the body is a quicker, oh, I get it, I feel better. Like versus the brain-based approaches sometimes, I think before we recorded, you talked about swinging. It didn't really work for you. That's more of a brain-based saccadic eye movement approach, versus just rolling on balls and getting massage. And you just like, you immediately feel like you're in a better, more relaxed state, right? And then it's really about light, right? Light. Eyes are light receivers. So how is our vision different at light and at day versus at night? The different cells in our eyes, how like looking into all those things. And then the fourth step is really fusion. This is about how do because a lot of times we just look at one eye and the other eye, and prescriptions are always just about visual acuity, how sharp you see, 20/20, 20/30. But, looking at how do the eyes work together? How do we create depth perception? What is our peripheral field? That's you really, this fourth step is looking into that. And then the fifth one, which is, it's not really going step by step in order. So some of these steps are interwoven, but I always say 90% of the Bates method is really using brain-based memory and imagination. So it's kind of woven into everything I do, kind of from the beginning, but in the end, we focus really a lot more on that mental state. And really, because if you can't imagine it, if you can't see it in your mind, how can you physically see it? So we have to work with Oliver Sacks called the mind's eye, or we have to use with this idea of memory and imagination. And so that is really the kind of overlaying piece. And then in the beginning, we might do that by, doing a technique with eyes open and eyes closed and using imagination to produce a desired effect. But really, it's really the most important thing at the end is to really kind of put it all together, right? So the steps are not all sequentially. So some of these things happen like an overlap, but these are the five like factors, what I would say, are five steps.
Okay. Yeah, 5 components of your program.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Yeah, I like that. Um, I think that you have to be in a certain mindset to be open to even delving into it that way, right? You can't be the person who wants the quick fix. You just wanna go to the eye doctor and have a prescription and be done with it, right?
Yeah, I would say that's true. But I think really quick, I always say there is no quick fix. There's no hack in health. It's like, yes, you're addressing the symptom. And at the end of the day, it bites you, it will not last forever. But I also understand that not everybody is willing to do the work, and looking at themselves and their habits and their beliefs. And I think it's okay. I don't think we can, force everybody to do this, but I feel like it should be an option. People need to be more aware of this exists.
Mhm.
And, at the end of the day, we can't function in a blurry world. So I know in many third world countries, people see clearly for the first time by getting glasses. So I feel like, I'm not somebody who says the glasses are just the devil. This is all bad stuff. But I think we need to understand better
Yeah,
what their purpose is and when they can be useful and when they can be harmful.
right. Well, I remember finding out about natural vision improvement when I was in my 20s. And I was in graduate school and I had little babies and my prescription was -6, so the idea of just throwing my glasses away was not even something I could consider. And there's other I didn't find out till later there were other ways to go about it.
And I think Bates talked a lot about this throwing the glasses away. And I know some teachers that were really adamant, like you can't improve your vision, you have to throw your glasses away. But I also, you know, you see people like literally with their nose at the screen, and I'm like, that's not going to be helpful. Like, so in a certain way, we need to function in our daily world, right? We need to function. We need to be safe. We have a way more demanding world nowadays. And I think stepping down in glasses, some people are okay not wearing their glasses. But if you have a -6, and I had clients that just walked around without glasses, but they didn't use central focus, which is something that you understand, or central fixation, like Bates called it. It's understanding where you look, you see things best, and everything was equally blurry for them. And at this point, your brain is just checked out. You're not actually engaging. You're just like, you're in your inner world. At this point, you're not actually looking. You're not actually engaging with the world. And so to me, that's not a benefit, so some people use pinhole glasses, whatever it is, but we have to have a certain amount of clarity, especially if we need to be productive or do our tax returns or write an email. We can't just like hoping for the best, tapping in the
Exactly.
phone. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why I went with the route of getting a reduced prescription, and I'm looking now to go further with that because it's been a long process for me, of just having slightly reduced prescription for years and years and years. After getting through the strabismus part of it, now I'm looking at the acuity part, you know?
And I
Um,
mean, I have a client who came to me after working for 15 years on her own and with a few other teachers. And she used contacts and literally stepped down a quarter diopter at a time until she had 20/20 vision again. And then she would step down, and she started with a -6. And when I met her, she was in a -1.5. And by the time she ended my program, the last thing I knew, I don't always hear from everybody, was that she was basically able to do everything without glasses, only for like night driving or whatever. She'd sometimes put glasses on. But she took the slow route and doing it one step at a time. And I think we need to also look at like whatever works for us. Because if we put too much pressure on ourselves, then we're not relaxed. And if we're not relaxed, we won't see any progress, right? If we force ourselves to do 4 hours of eye exercises every day and put all this pressure, today I have to, see a line lower on the eye chart. It's not gonna, trust me, I've tried all this. I've tried like doing it, forcing myself. It's not working.
Mhm. Yeah, I haven't been able to force myself to make it work either. Can we talk a little bit about the emotional causes of these issues? Because I know you recognized as you went through your journey that there was emotional uh, triggers, I guess, for blurry vision, or can we even talk about maybe the trigger for strabismus if you've identified?
So yeah, it's like I personally, it's not like I've done all this work. I definitely had a lot of mentors and my own understanding and working with a lot of clients. I've come to understand that in farsightedness, there is definitely this, and again, this was me, it's definitely this pushing out, like there's anger, there's frustration, impatience. You're like, get out of my way. And I was like, I remember in my 20s when that movie Nikita came out, like Luc Besson, like that movie. I was like, just get, like, I was so angry. I was like, I wanted to be that kind of crazy hit woman, like, not that I wanted to really kill people, but definitely that kind of tendency. And with nearsightedness, I discovered there's more of this kind of with being withdrawn. And I always think the nervous system always wants to protect us. And when I got to school, I already had glasses. So I was already in glasses, kind of being forced to see clearly versus people or kids that might go to school. And school is a big trauma or adverse childhood event for many kids. Like might get bullied or teased with, like, maybe we're more introvert and all of a sudden there's all these kids and you have to navigate in your system and you don't know how anything works. And we're kind of thrown into this world. And then the nervous system is like, this is all too scary, let's blur this out. And we're not really nearsighted. It's like pseudomyopia. But then the teachers are required to report you can't see the blackboard or whatever it is nowadays. It's not the blackboard anymore, I think, in most cases. But
Yeah.
all of a sudden, then the kids gets taken to the eye doctor. And I did talk to a medical doctor who did his residency with a pediatric ophthalmologist. And he said they can't really measure their kids' vision. Like the kids are moving, because it's so their refractive power is like 60 diopters, and it's really, really hard. And I've seen that with my neighbor here. Her daughter had some farsightedness symptoms, and she showed me 2 prescriptions from different doctors, radically different. So, but then they tell the eye doctor says, oh, the kid has to wear these glasses. So I think in that point, it's like looking at like what is the kids, like when I work with kids, when I used to work with kids, they tell me all the things that upset them, that scared them. But then as parents, maybe they really hated the school or they really didn't feel safe there. And then sometimes there's a lot of pressure. I mean, I was a single mom, so I know how it is. I couldn't just send my kids to like, we had certain constraints financially and my time and everything. So, but I think really you're not nearsighted. It's just, and then you get the glasses and they kind of force you to be stuck, to have this clear vision. Like it's kind of like imposed on you. And now what does your nervous system do? Either it makes your vision worse again and blurry again, you get stronger glasses, but really now you're locked into this state. And in animal studies, we now know that the physiology of the eyeball adjusts the glasses. So then, of course, you become actually nearsighted.
Mhm.
And with astigmatism, in which I had quite a lot in my right eye, and that can sometimes flares up a little bit when it's that ADD, like, you know, difficulty focusing, that kind of doing 20 things at once, multitasking, having all these balls in the air. And so that's something that I definitely found, like not even knowing who am I really truly. That's what I told you in the beginning. When didn't have the glasses, I'm like, I thought I was this kind of weird kid that had like, and I had crazy internal rotation in my legs and I had to wear these things in my shoes, you know. So I felt like everything in my body wasn't really aligned correctly. And
No,
I was always told,
I
what?
want to go with that because I had the
Okay.
same thing. I was born pigeon-toed. And so the way they
Yeah.
treated that in the 60s was they put casts on your feet. And so I had the cast. And then I had the corrective shoes with the bar in between, to push my feet out.
Oh, I didn't have that extreme. I just had these things in my shoes. Oh my God, that sounds really
Yeah,
traumatizing.
so I that's what was happening to me when I was a child, very small, and I think that was probably before I got glasses at age 3, as they were dealing with the pigeon toe thing. And my younger brother also had really bad strabismus at birth, but mine surfaced when I was 3, and it would have been after all of this treatment for my pigeon-toed feet. And I've always felt like there was a connection, and so hearing you say that is, like, so gratifying because nobody talks about it as our whole body being connected and our alignment affecting everything.
100%. Now, I'm not an expert in all these like things. I know I work a lot with the feet too in my work with the myofascial release because if we have tension in the feet, we don't feel grounded and we are not balanced, and that affects our vestibular system and our vision. And so I do feel it's all connected. But I know some people talk about the birth and the birth canal and the pregnancy, and I think my mom was going through a lot of stress being a young pregnant woman and giving. I mean, when I was pregnant, I was going through a lot of stress. So I feel like, but I don't know. I'm not the expert on these things, but I think instead of looking at the root cause, we got these contraptions, again, of strengthening the feet and maybe working on hip rotation. And how can we, especially as a child, right? We still have those malleable bones. Like, we all have different femurs in the pelvis, and so when I did my yoga teacher training, I'm like, well, like, what is the limit of increasing your flexibility or mobility? Because I was always the stiff one, right?
Mhm.
And they said, well, once it gets to bone on bone, that's it. But the fascia and the muscles can all adjust. But instead of and I remember actually getting some kind of physical therapy as a kid too, but it was scary. I just remember there was this leather coated, scary devices. And I just remember everything was really scary to me. I felt really like, what is this thing I have to hang there? And I was afraid of heights. And, as a kid, I was, you probably too, we were super, super sensitive or sensible, no, sensitive.
Yes.
And so we were like, a lot of this was just scary. And also the other thing is like, I'm not normal. I have to do all these things, but my sister doesn't. Like she was fine, then you feel like, what's wrong with me? And so you get into this whole thinking. And when I got rid of my glasses, I was like, but yeah, I think the astigmatism, like it was like this, oh, now boys tell me I have beautiful eyes. Wait, me? Like, so to me, I went through this whole like digging into Zen Buddhism. I was really into the spiritual path at some point because I was like, who am I? Like, and I think we all do this as teenagers.
Mhm.
But the glasses to me were like this part of me where where I was bullied and teased and I wasn't valuable.
Mhm.
Like, people made fun of me and I didn't feel like, in hindsight, it's so crazy when I think about, like, I always thought I was this introvert. And then somebody said, you're not introverted. I'm like, well, I
I
was
always
shy, but
I
I
thought
had
that
to,
too.
now I feel, right? Now I feel
Yeah.
and so I think a lot of these things come together, and what is chicken and egg and what caused what and why were we pigeon toes, and and I think with yoga and working with strength and mobility and all these things that now we know so much more,
Yeah.
about how we have to be squatting a lot more, and then we had the 60s when we grew up, and you know what I mean, like we did a lot of things. Now we know better on some things, and some things we're doing now is way worse than what we did back then, right? I mean,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
they don't treat pigeon-toed children the way they did in the 60s anymore. You know, they
I
say
know.
they're going to grow out of it. Okay, well, why don't we grow out of all of this? Right? And I was put in bifocals at age 3 for my strabismus.
Oh gosh, really?
And I remember my prescription getting worse every single year until I hit puberty, and then my prescription stayed stable after that.
But the
And I don't
bifocal,
know
you
what
were
it started at.
nearsighted. I think the bifocals in a way made sense if you were nearsighted, because as a nearsighted person and you're reading a lot and you're going to school, I'm not saying at age 3, but my point is, and bifocals have all, we can talk about all the problems I see with these bifocals or progressive glass because they create weird head postures. But
Mhm.
generally speaking, as a nearsighted person, you should not, the same diopters you need for far vision is not what you need for close up. In fact, you probably didn't need anything for close up. So technically taking your glasses off would have been better.
Mm.
But yeah, it's so interesting. Like looking at all the connections between stress about trauma, about not feeling seen or not wanting to be seen,
Yeah.
which was
Well,
definitely a big
and
thing.
I noticed you said that your mother was an anxious mother too. And
Yeah.
my mother was super anxious because she had lost her first child. Her first
Oh
baby
wow.
was premature and had died a day after birth, right? So then she had me, and she was very anxious about everything to do with the pregnancy and me as a baby. And and then my brother comes along 20 months later with strabismus, and it's all kind of building. And I feel like
Right.
that waking up at age 3 with crossed eyes was nothing unusual based on my background, you know and what can we do different moving forward? What can we tell people that have children that are experiencing these things so that things can be different for them than it was for me? That's what I'm about.
I think I love that you're doing this. And I think also being a parent and you're being a parent. And, if you ask my adult daughters now, they would probably tell you all the things that I did wrong. And I think we do our best as parents. And,
Right.
we don't get in, like, I was really doing my best, but things change and we don't always know. And I did forgive my parents and they really tried their best. And they also, I think anxiety was even more financial concerns. Like we didn't have any money, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and like all the things back then. But overall, at least I always say we used to play till the streetlights came on, and we did all kinds of shenanigans. And when I look at kids' lives now with the devices and the overstructured time, there's no more time for boredom. Laying in the grass, looking at the clouds, like, what does that cloud look like? Oh, that looks like a bunny, all
Mm.
the stuff that we used to do, playing in the garden. And, I mean, when I think about all that, that really overall, I had a happy childhood. But those first years, I really felt like like something was wrong with me, really, so.
Mhm. Yeah, and you're describing so much of what I experienced as a child too.
That is, yeah,
Yeah.
I think we went through some other things. And strabismus, what I understand, from my mentor, Anat Axelrod, I don't know if you ever interviewed her, but she does a lot with the emotional levels and talked a lot
She's
about with children. Like,
she is
is she
actually
in
on
it?
my list of people to have on.
Yeah, Anat is
Yeah.
amazing. And
Yeah.
I interviewed her and she told me because she works a lot with parents and kids, and I don't anymore. I
Mhm.
did it very briefly. And so she talked a lot about how disagreements in the family, and my parents never really, like, I never saw them fight, but we don't always know what happened behind closed doors. But there was, so like, if there's a pull out, like there's some disharmony, it makes sense that the eyes also don't align. So there could also be something like letting go and letting things happen and just trusting. And when my older daughter, my first daughter, was born with strabismus, her
Mhm.
eye went in and everybody said, take her to the eye doctor, take her to the eye doctor, and I was like, no, because I didn't want her to go through the same trauma. And then eventually she was 8 and she had trouble reading. I took her to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor said she has perfect vision and her squint was basically gone. And all of a sudden it clicked and she was reading a lot, but she was, you know what I mean? And certain things we all develop differently. And as parents, we get this kind of list by age so and so, they need to do this and this. And of course, there's good reason for these things, right? Because you also might figure out at some point there is a bigger problem if they don't do this by a certain age. But you know what I mean? This pressure that your kid is academically successful. And now my older daughter has perfect vision. She's a cinematographer. I mean, this is all about vision. She's a focus puller. And she was the one where everybody told me, take her to the eye doctor. And had I not gone through what I had gone through, I might have done this, and maybe who knows, she would have ended up in glasses. And she really didn't need that, right? She didn't need that. She needed a lot more hand-eye coordination. And, what did I know why she had a strabismus in the right eye like me? I don't really know. It's sometimes, I was really close to my dad, and they always say in Chinese medicine, the right side is the man or the male side. And I was, if anything, my eye would have been more in the left because I was closer to my dad than my mom. And so who knows when my right eye was turning in? I really don't know, to be honest. So I don't want everybody listening to think that we always know exactly why this or that is happening, but something wasn't aligned and something felt challenging for me. And who knows, maybe it was from in utero also. I don't know, to be honest.
Right. There's all kinds of things we can speculate that way. And
Right, right, right.
mine was my left eye turning in, and my youngest daughter was just like me, and
Uh-huh.
so had her left eye turning in. And so I think that there's some, I don't know, predisposition or triggers or whatever that are kind of inherited, and then we get to figure out how we're going to heal those emotional wounds, that have been in our families and passed down
Right. And
a
I
long
feel like
time.
what you just said, some of it could be genetics, but some of it could also be personalities and emotional states that could then, be transferred to the baby. So I feel like we don't really know. But yeah, there is a tendency. So that was the same. It's so interesting that you had the similar experience with your daughter and me with my daughter. And yes, she did grow out of it, so to speak. And of course, I watched it, and it wasn't like I was ignorant about it, but I also didn't want to subject her. An eye exam is scary, especially if you're a child. It's really scary. So I
Mhm.
didn't want her to do this unless I would have found there was problems, right? And she couldn't see things. And so, yeah, so it's not about being ignorant, but it's also like being smart about like anytime that a kid goes to a doctor, it's stressful. It's stressful,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the people that you've helped with different conditions that some of the listeners might be wondering about?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with so many scenarios. I'm trying to think. So I have one example of somebody who was nearsighted, and she had a corrective restriction in her driver's license for 40 years. And after doing my program, she told me, which is always so exciting, that her correction is no longer needed and she can drive without glasses. So we had somebody farsighted in her 70s, really high progressive prescription. And then we broke it down and she started wearing just the drugstore readers. And then eventually she didn't need anything for distance. She was like a plus 275 for distance. Um, Somebody telling me the cataracts can no longer be seen by the eye doctor. Oh, and then another one that was just sometimes I'm so blown away. So I had several people that had Fuchs dystrophy. That's a corneal disease. The first round I ran my program, she decided to have the surgery. So she did the program and then she had the surgery, which is corneal transplants.
Mhm.
From a cadaver, the second time was in 2020, and due to COVID, this was a different person. She couldn't do the surgery, right? So she just did my program instead. We were all locked down, right? We were all looking at, and now she just told me it's the fifth year where the eye doctor said, so the Fuchs dystrophy is still there, but she doesn't need, her corneas are healthy still. So she still has the genetic, like, you know what I mean? It's still there.
Mhm.
But it's the fifth year in a row where she doesn't need the corneal transplant, and they had already scheduled her for surgery.
Mhm.
So to me, whatever we like, even if we prevent or keep our eye health longer and longer, or having somebody who had LASIK and she was back in glasses, as she was originally nearsighted and now being able to read, things at 70% reduction on the screen, seeing the distance clearly. um, oh, another one that was a good one was similar to you, so very, very farsighted, so truly hyperopic with like a +8 for reading, a +5 something for distance. Also amblyopia, so lazy eye,
Mhm.
and had done vision therapy, which is what I usually recommend for people with more severe things, in addition to what I do. Sometimes we need that vision therapy. And she had done that for a year and still wasn't able to read a book or do her photography because she was a photographer. She got these headaches. And after doing my program, she told me, I can read a book now for 20 minutes at a time, and it just gave me so much joy back. So she was still, took the prisms out, as far as I remember, which is something I always try to do because the prisms just do the, the converging for you. And so instead of making the eyes or helping the brain converge, but just even with all the vision therapy and the glasses and the prisms, she still couldn't read. It immediately gave her headaches. And then she was able to do it for 15, 20 minutes at a time. So it's not always about just getting rid of glasses. It's really getting your life back and doing the things that you love doing. And even if you still need glasses, sometimes I think we need to differentiate that. Are we the glasses, or is it like really affecting our lifestyle, the things that we like to do? Do you have to give up night driving? I had one client who said, I used to drive slow in the slow lane. Now I'm driving fast, not over the fast in the fast lane at night because I had night vision. She really struggled. And if you live in the United States, everything is basically, you need a car. And if you can't drive anymore, you're basically, handicapped. Like your freedom is really impacted if you're not able to drive somewhere at night, especially in the winter.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there's so many amazing stories I could tell you. It's like,
Is there any age restriction on your program?
no, I think there's no age restriction. I'm assuming you're talking about the top level. We had somebody in their 90s with glaucoma and macular degeneration. And I always say you can always make improvements. At a very minimum, you can keep the vision where it is at so that it doesn't get worse, because usually it gets worse and worse, as we get older.
Mhm.
So I would say not everybody can totally get out of glasses. It really depends on so many factors, from toxic exposure to mold to heavy metals to smoking to steroid use. How much the diet, right? If you don't eat a good diet, like the retinal health. I mean, there's so many factors that impact our eye health.
Mhm.
So yeah, we want to have all these things in check. When it comes to like children, that's probably something when we look at board games, it always says from like age 0 to 99 or something on board games, like I think with children, everything has to be, and even with adults, making it a game, making it fun. When we do palming, like, resting the eyes and covering them up, the parent could cover up the eyes, tell the bedtime story or make it a little game where you both close your eyes, or one person has them, the kid has them open, you palm them, and then they have to do it. And so basically make it a fun game and really play games with children. Like roll ball games are great, catch and throw games.
Mhm.
So my online programs are not designed for children. And I always would say, I had a person one taking my course with a 13-year-old daughter. I'm like, wow, my 13-year-old daughters wouldn't do nothing that I would recommend. Like for the teenage years between like 12 and like 18,
Mhm.
forget about it, right?
Yeah,
But they have to wanted to do it themselves, like I did back then. And we were curious about these things.
right.
But as a parent or as a caregiver, like look at, like, do they always do it with this hand? Are they always turning, like, observe them, notice things, and then all the techniques that we're doing, turn them into some kind of games. That's really important with kids.
Okay. Awesome. Um, what do you think the most common misconceptions about eyesight are that you wish people would understand?
I think one of them is that vision can only get worse, and that glasses surgery and contacts are the only solution. I think those are the big ones that
Mhm.
people think about, and not understanding that we actually don't see in the eyeball, that we see in the brain. And that Dr. Bates always called it about what we see is not the impression on the retina, but it's our interpretation of the impression on the retina. So that's why, I always like to bring up this 10-year-old. I had to look up how, like, 10-year-old thing. And I don't know if you remember, there was this photo of this black and blue striped dress that was taken on his cell phone. There was this internet-wide debate and war, like, no, this is white and gold. No, it's like, and they finally figured out it was a low-res photo. You didn't see much of the background, but you make assumptions. And we know this from visual illusions, right? How easily do we fall? Which gray is darker? And then the gray on white looks darker than the same gray on black, because we compare contrast. With that photo, it was like, is it outside? Is it inside? Is it daytime? Is it nighttime? Is this in the shadow? So when we make all these assumptions, this is how we perceive. That's why people can argue about the same thing with our experience, our memory, our awareness, our visual. And like we basically create an interpretation of what we see. And I don't know if you've talked about this study they did with people that have dissociative identity disorder. Have you ever talked about that one?
Oh.
So they did studies, these are people that have multiple personas or alters, right? It's a mental illness. And I remember there was a great show called The United States of Terror. Toni Collette played the main character. It was like 2009, 2010, right when I did my teacher training.
Mhm.
And I noticed in one of her six personas, she was Bud. And Bud was a guy and he wore jeans, overalls, and glasses. And she didn't wear glasses. And then back then I was like, maybe it's just the style as Bud. She feels like, and then I learned in these studies that people actually there could be -3 diopters nearsighted in one persona and have perfect eagle vision in another.
Yeah.
The color perception, the intraocular eye pressure was different. The pupil size was different. So now thinking this is the same physical body, this is just your brain, believing that you're these different. So when you look at that, I'm like, why are we not talking about this, right?
Mhm.
How much more is this brain-based, really driven by how do we see ourselves? How like all these factors is really, you know, and you have some blind people that have almost like real vision, you know. So and then we have some people that have eagle eye vision and don't see anything really, so that's why I like the word vision better than eyesight, because eyesight just talks about visual acuity, which is important.
Yeah.
But blind people have 8,000 photoreceptor cells. I forgot exactly what they're called, but as long as you have eyeballs, they know if it's day or nighttime because they have these blue light receptors in their retina, which don't are not seeing cells, but they notice the light, the frequency. I think it's much more complicated of visual sense than what we are led to believe when we go to the eye doctor and we look at like, here's the eye, and they only look, I always say they focus 100% on the 10%, which is the eyeball. And
Right.
yes, we want the eyeball to be healthy, but even if your eyeball isn't healthy, like Jacob Lieberman talks about this, how if he goes to the doctor, he would still show up as a -2 or 3 myopia if you put them in the machine, because his eyeball is still a little bit elongated, but yet he can see perfectly clear. So why do we have people with the same prescription being able to read different, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so yes, the good eyeball is helpful, but it doesn't mean that's the whole thing. There's so much more to seeing.
Right. Yes, I am totally on board with all of that. And I was thinking as you were talking about the color perception thing about something I saw recently where they tested at what point do people see blue versus green? And it was this whole big spectrum of, it had to be a certain level of green before someone thought it was green or a certain level of blue, and everything in between was where someone thought it was actually blue versus green. And it was
And
pretty
we compare
fascinating.
things, right? We compare, if you ever like, oh, I'm going to paint my walls white, and then you go to the paint store and there's like 100 swatches white, and you're like, oh, and then you hold them, oh, this is more red, this is more yellow, because we always end up with vision, we always end up comparing contrast, and the highest contrast is 21:1 is white and black. It's the highest level of contrast. And so as we get older, sometimes those contrast tests, right, where we reduce the contrast, where it's higher, more difficult to see, but we can also practice these things like night vision. If
Mhm.
we always turn on our flashlight, if we never actually walk in the dark, how are we supposed to have great night vision? We, first of all, don't have great night vision. Our rod cells are very light sensitive, but they're not like, that's why FBI agents always wear those goggles, because our night vision isn't that great as long as there's some light. Yeah. But if it's like, if we're in a cave, if you've ever been in a cave,
Yeah.
we literally can't see the hand in front of our eyes. So, we're not bats. We're not like predators who hunt at nights like cats. So but we also have to practice this. If we never expose our cells to darkness, how are we supposed to even be able to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that the junk light that we're exposed to, I mean, we don't, and I live in Los Angeles. I mean, there's so much light pollution. Without a mask, I would never even have a dark bedroom, which is important for eye health, right? We want for circadian clock and sleep. I have to wear an eye mask. There's no way I could actually get sleep otherwise. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, that's true in most cities, I would say. And this city that I live in now has like 10 million people in it. And
Oh, wow. Yeah. I don't even know how many Los Angeles has, but it's probably similar. So,
it's way less actually. I looked up the most populated cities just out of curiosity, and I think about a dozen of the top 50 were in China, and
wow.
the only one that was in the top 50 in the United States was New York. So,
Wow. I had no idea.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. Uh, why don't you tell my listeners how they can find your programs and what's starting next?
So I don't know when this is coming out, but my website is naturalclearvision.com. If you're on Instagram, I'm a holistic vision coach on Instagram and YouTube. I do a weekly live show every Wednesday on YouTube. I call it Clear Vision Wednesday, just because it's on Wednesdays at
Which
noon
I
Pacific.
love. I love that, by the way.
Thank you.
It's so good.
Um, so I interview other experts because I'm always curious too. Today we talked about cancer and I had no idea. Like I like to learn more things, also how all the dots are connected. So Instagram is one of the places I'm hanging out at. And then I have sometimes once a year, sometimes this year we're gonna do it 3 times, 2 more times. I have a free training called Seabed in just 4 days. It's like some people call these things challenges.
Mhm.
I have a free download that you can download with some of my top 10 vision habits. So yeah, I do master classes. I really try to do a lot of things for free so that people can get a sense of be like kind of start being interested in this journey. But just like you did, eventually you need help, right? You can only get so far with do it yourself. I've seen this with so many of my clients that I even had a client who got her eye doctor to reduce her prescription, but she was so tense, so tense. So we did a lot of the myofascial work first, and they reduced their glasses by two. I was way too much from -475 to 275. It was too much. So she was straining against the blur, really had insomnia. We had to really work with the nervous system regulation, calming her down, and then working with the vision. So sometimes we need to do like grounding, breath work, relaxing the body before we even get into the work. And so I always say when I do my 5 day my 4 day training, see better in for just 4 days, I always say, don't believe me, don't believe Denise, don't believe your eye doctor either, but see for yourself because we can show in 4 days that improvement that you have a big impact on how your vision looks like. And once you understand that, it's easier to connect the dots. And I always say, without a coach, I have a coach for everything in my life. It doesn't matter if it's money management, building my business, for my own health. I'm detoxing from mold and heavy metals, which we're all exposed to. So I'm not trying to figure this out myself because I would go down all kinds of rabbit holes. And so finding somebody that you can trust, but really understanding a little bit more how much impact you have on your vision versus just blaming it on age and genetics, which do have a play. They play some part in it, but it's actually the smaller part in how your vision looks like as you get older. So it's up
Great,
to you.
great. I love it. Uh, what's your final tip that you want to give today for people as they're trying to navigate this vision improvement?
I think being really mindful of your vision, what we talked about, the strains and gains, noticing when your vision is better, when it's worse, really like understanding that how your vision varies, just like your nervous system, your heart rate, your pulse, your blood pressure, your blood sugar, all these things. I have an aura ring. We look at all these things, how they changed. And just like that, your vision changes and how your choices, your daily habits, your nervous system regulations, everything has an impact on your vision. And while it's easier to just blame it on genetics and be like, I'm at that age and leave it all up to the hands of the doctors, taking over taking over control over your health because at the end of the day, nobody cares about your vision as much as you do. And one thing I want to add to this is like, what is your vision for your life? Why do we get cataracts in the mid 60s? Louise Hay even talked about it. She said, dark future, no joy in life. Like we don't see ourselves like, empty nester, retired, like looking at what is your purpose? What is your path? What are you here to do in the world? I love this Japanese concept of ikigai, right? And maybe you don't have to make money maybe you can just do what you love but get like when I look at the blue zones, which sorry, I'm now getting on a longer final thought, but when you look at the blue zones, where they interviewed Dan Bittner, interviewed all these centenarians, right? They
Mhm.
all had this sense of purpose. They all had this community. They had this joy of getting up in the morning. It's not like, oh, it's another day, it's another Monday, which is so what is your thing that gets you excited? Really, it's so important where we see ourselves, our vision, because if we, where do we put, what do we want to do in our future self vision is, I think, what I would say is like, you know, I see so many people retiring and then their health falls apart and their vision falls apart because they really don't see, they don't like, they feel kind of useless. Like how we felt as kids when we didn't feel useless, but we felt like we were weird and, we weren't like nobody would miss us if we weren't there, to be honest. And how about you as you get into your 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s? What like, we don't respect elders like we used to, but if you are like that cool cat, like, have you ever interviewed Ray Gottlieb?
I haven't, but that would be awesome.
Oh my God, he's in his 80s. And I'm always like, he's such a cool cat where I'm like, oh my God, you're just so cool. Nobody would be like, oh, you're 80, you're old. You like, who do you want to be when you're in your 70s, 80s, 90s, right? Like, I think that's important to think about, but it's just this body that's kind of looking more wrinkly and kind of declining. We have a lot of choices. So that was a long final thought.
No, I love
Yeah.
it. Thank you so much for that. I think this is going to be really impactful for people. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Healing Our Sight podcast. I'd love to hear from you. If you like this episode, please share it. And please join our Facebook community at Healing Our Sight to leave suggestions or comments. Have a great day.